Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we've got some pretty exciting stuff to talk about as Elon Musk has officially unveiled or revealed x.ai, or I guess just xAI now. We'll talk about that and some of the ties that may have to Tesla. Then we've also got some news on tax credits, news on production, updates on Cybertruck, and a few other items as well. All right, looking at the stock, Tesla today up 0.8%, slightly underperforming again the NASDAQ, up 1.1%, but closing at $271.99 on the day today, as we are now 1 week out from the Q2 earnings report. We'll quickly look at the CPI, which came out this morning, the Consumer Price Index. So it was a little bit below expectations, probably 0.1% or so across the various different metrics, which is nice to see. So just a 3% increase year over year for the headline number, which was driven down by significant declines in energy year over year. So if we look at core year over year, it's a little bit stickier, still a decline from last month, but up 5.3% over, this happened to me last time. This is still last month's number. There we go. Now it's updated. Yeah, so 4.8%, I knew that was off. 4.8% increase year over year, so down from 5.3% last month. And then if we look at the month over month comparisons, these are the correct months, 0.2% increase on the core. So although a little bit stickier on the year over year comparison, in a pretty reasonable range month over month, and still I think the lowest month over month increase that we've seen since back in looks like September of last year. So a little bit of progress there. And then for headline month over month, also a 0.2% increase. So all said, I think pretty good news from the CPI report, and we'll look out for the PPI report tomorrow. All right, so kind of the big news for today, Elon Musk has officially unveiled / launched xAI. Interesting timing on the unveiling here, July 12th, 2023, which would be expressed in American date format as 7/12/23, which adds up to 42. Of course, the Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy, answer, and then what is the question? So the goal of xAI, which sort of framed up by that, is to understand the true nature of the universe, as stated here on their website. They're also going to give a little bit more information and allow people to ask questions about xAI on a Twitter Spaces on Friday. Elon did do another Twitter Spaces today, which we'll briefly talk about, discussing some things about AI in general, but it didn't seem to be quite as focused on the company like this Twitter Spaces might be in a couple of days. So they did share a little bit about the team. You can read some of those things there and see the team members, about a dozen people right now that are listed. And they are, of course, recruiting, as Musk companies tend to do. So I'm sure they got a lot of applications today. But in relation to the other companies, xAI says that we are a separate company from X Corp, but we'll work closely with X, or Twitter, Tesla, and other companies to make progress towards our mission. So obviously with anything like this, when another company starts up, and whether it's Twitter, that not a startup, but that Elon is putting resources towards, and there's always been the drama about Tesla employees helping out with Twitter things, and during that period of time, I think there's probably similar questions that would have come from xAI here, and obviously Tesla, as Elon has said, is going to be a major player in the AI space as well. So would it make sense for this to just fall under Tesla? Perhaps, but it sounds like they're going to be working on different things than sort of real world AI, which would be where Tesla's focus primarily would be. But it's nice to see that they are going to work closely, and we have seen that collaboration be effective for Elon companies over a long period of time now with Tesla and SpaceX, where they're able to share, knowledge and potentially even employees at times of need to make progress when the opportunity presents itself. So although it might initially seem like it's frustrating that this doesn't fall into Tesla, this being on its own will allow them to target different people from a recruiting standpoint, and some of those people could eventually then make their way into either Tesla completely working there, or partially making their way over to help out during certain periods of time where Tesla maybe needs some help with some certain things that they know they've got the expertise there at xAI to help out with. So again, I think this is actually going to be pretty beneficial for Tesla to have that sort of cross-pollination opportunity down the road. So here's the xAI Twitter. You can follow that. It's just xAI. Pretty simple. Nice when you have the owner there of Twitter to get that handle for you. And then Elon did do a Twitter space, again, just talking about AI in general. So just got a couple of notes here. He said xAI is essentially going to build/grow an AI in what he says is a good way, or at least that's his hope. And he thinks the way to do that would be to maximally target curiosity or maximally incentivize curiosity, as well as truth seeking. So that'll kind of be how they're setting the construct of what they're trying to build. And then he said that, he believes that an AI that's developed in that way for maximal curiosity should be pro-humanity, just because it's more interesting. He gave the example of Mars. There's not really much going on there. and humans certainly make Earth a little bit more interesting relative to that comparison. So he hopes that one that is curious would be incentivized strongly to keep humans around, which I think kind of makes sense, but obviously no telling. And then just kind of general things that he brought up. He said that they started to get into conversation about AI regulation, and that kind of led into China and Elon's recent discussions with China. And that led into a more general conversation about some of the risks down the road from here. He said that the most concerning thing probably over the next 3 years or so would be the situation between China and Taiwan and how that gets resolved. So Elon does view that as a pretty significant risk, which obviously there's been a lot of discussion on that and will continue to be, but interesting to hear his point of view on that so candidly. And then he said probably in the 5 to 6 year time frame, super AI, digital superintelligence, probably the next biggest concern. So we don't need to go too deep into that at this point, but obviously a lot of different ways that could play out. All right, so moving on from xAI for now, although we'll continue to talk about it. We do have an update here. I'm not sure who was the original poster on this, but Patrick O'Connell sharing a photo of some Cybertruck bodies at Giga Texas, presumably, where we can see pretty much the full setup here of the body in white. You can see the giant rear castings, massive. Front castings, it looks like up here as well. And then, of course, the rest of the frame, which would be comprised probably of stamped materials. So pretty cool to see, more than one of these at a time and see them sort of pieced together. And again, I think we're continuing to make pretty good progress from all the visible signs externally that we can see for Cybertruck, hopefully this quarter. All right, let's move on to China production data. So we did get this overnight, and pretty interesting stuff here. So if we look at the July production numbers, it was 80,365 vehicles produced by Tesla, but most interestingly was the Model 3 production numbers, which was 27,440. So we had, of course, those rumors that, Tesla was stopping Model 3 production early in June to make improvements for Highland, and pretty clearly that didn't happen unless it was just a very, very short period of time that they stopped Model 3 production for, because 27,000 actually higher than last month and probably higher than the average over the last 6 to 9 months. So there really doesn't seem to be any significant downtime for the Model 3 in June. That could mean that we're coming up on more significant downtime, since presumably not a lot of that retooling maybe has happened yet. And what it also could mean is that we are likely seeing lower production numbers from Berlin and Texas than a forecast which had some downtime here for the Model 3 in June in Shanghai would have yielded, because if this was something closer to zero, then that would leave 25,000 vehicles that would have had to come from somewhere else, and presumably those would have come from Texas and Berlin. So it's actually a little bit disappointing on that hand that this number is coming in higher, although it's nice to see strong production from Shanghai. I would have preferred to see these units being produced by Berlin and Texas, because it would mean that they're further advanced in the ramp, which is obviously going to yield higher production figures if you extrapolate from that. So we'll have to go back and kind of do a little bit of math on how that shakes out for Berlin and Texas, but it'll be a little bit lower than what we thought maybe initially with the Q2 delivery and production report. Now, one final note on this, a little bit more positive. Since there were this many Model 3s produced, and we did still see a pretty massive drain in inventory towards the end of this quarter, where you can see wholesale sales, including exports, but wholesale sales outpacing production by about 13,300 vehicles. With that being the case, with Model 3 production being pretty much normal throughout this month, I think it speaks a little bit more positively to the sales figures, because if this had just been no Model 3 production and then we still saw, these Model 3 sales, it would have kind of been reasonable to be draining that inventory. But the fact that we're still seeing inventory decline while production was up and running, I think is a pretty positive sign for, demand for the Model 3. I don't think I explained that super well, but hopefully that point comes across at least a little bit. If you have questions on that, just ask me in the comments. Another milestone for Shanghai, they did produce their 1 millionth Model Y vehicle today. So an awesome milestone. If we go back and we look, I don't have it all shown here, but Model Y production started, I think, late Q4 2019, but really in earnest in Q1 of 2020. So really now we're, 2-3 years in for them to have already produced their 1 millionth vehicle. Just a pretty incredible pace of progress on that ramp, obviously. And if we look at the lifetime production, I think through June, it's somewhere in the 980,000 ballpark. It's a little bit unclear on that, Q4 2019 production. Actually, sorry, I think I'm 1 year off on that. I think it was Q4 2020, and then going into 2021 was when it's, so just push those comments forward 1 year. But with that being the case, I think so far it was around 980,000 produced, which would maybe mean 20,000 produced so far in the first 12 days of Q3, which would be roughly in line with their pace, maybe a little bit better than the pace of production that we have seen so far. So it doesn't tell us a whole lot, but just kind of shows that they've had solid production here in the first part of the month. All right, update here on Giga Berlin. So it looks like next week, right on earnings day, the application documents for the expansion of Giga Berlin that we have previously talked about are going to be made public for public commentary, which of course is a pretty lengthy process, as we know, in Germany. So that's going to be published on the 19th. We should be able to kind of dig into those plans and see what Tesla is looking to do. Of course, the expectation is that these plans will be to double the capacity up to 1 million cars per year. So keep an eye out for that next week, although it may get lost a little bit in everything relating to earnings. And then on Tesla's website, we've got an update on the federal tax credit. No changes right now, but Tesla has changed the language in their little banner here to say that reductions to tax credits are likely after December 31st. So basically saying as we head into 2024, there are going to be some reductions to this full credit as those criteria for full credits get a little bit tougher on battery components and battery materials, qualifications. So what's interesting here is that if we go to the Model 3 page, so this is the Model 3 just general page, this banner stays the same, reductions to tax credit likely after December 31st. If we go to the order page, we see the same thing here where it is, where did that go? There it is. I know I'm covering it here, but you can see reductions likely after December 31st on this Model 3 page. And then if we go over to Model Y, banner is different, doesn't include that language. And then same thing here, that language is omitted. So whatever reductions that Tesla is expecting with this update seem to be focused on the Model 3. Obviously, we've had a little bit of flip-flopping on that throughout the year, so not too surprising on that, but we'll see how that comes in. Also on tax credits, so the New Jersey tax credit program on EVs looks like it's been extended. I think they kind of reevaluate this each year, and I think they're going into the fourth year on this now. So there is going to continue to be a $4,000 tax credit in New Jersey for EVs under $45,000, and then for vehicles between $45,000 and $55,000, it's going to be a $1,500 credit. So pretty exciting. I mean, if we go back to the Model 3 order page here, you can see vehicles starting at about $40,000. You knock $11,500 off of that between a state credit and a federal tax credit. You're looking at a vehicle that starts under $29,000 that is a Tesla Model 3, which then you factor in, gas savings and maintenance savings and things like that. If you're buying a car that is at all similar to the Model 3, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to buy much else, at least for a new vehicle. So pretty nice to see those incentives kind of stack up there in New Jersey and really make that value hard to really compete with any other car. All right, a couple other quick things here. So not a Tesla app reporting that with a recent software update, Tesla has added the capability to control the windshield wipers with the editability of the steering wheel controls. So the quick click wheels, you can now program those or edit those to be controllable for the wipers, which I think previously there was maybe a little bit of capability, and now it's fully capable to manage just from that if you want to customize it in that way. So nice to see that update. Hopefully will become irrelevant with Tesla's actually good wiper update here coming soon with integrating surround video neural networks to the wiper algorithms, or, neural networks control system. Okay, we've got another update here on the solar roof. So it looks like Tesla has settled a class action lawsuit relating to the solar roof price increases that we talked about a number of months ago, which, not surprising, these were pretty significant price increases that were sent out to customers that had already basically ordered. So although maybe not technically locked into an agreement, pretty much implied that they had secured their pricing, and then Tesla kind of went back and changed that. So the settlement, only $6 million, not a huge hit, but probably what's most interesting is it gives us a little bit of information as a part of the court case on where the solar roof orders or customer, placements at that point in time were. So according to Tesla, according to the court documents, there were 8,600 customers that were a part of the group affected by the price hikes, resulting in about 6,300 cancellations, which is about a 70% cancellation rate, very high. But these price increases were very significant at that time, if you recall those, tens of thousands of dollars in many cases. And then it also says that Tesla completed about 1,650 of the solar roof contracts of this 8,600 at the original price. So I'm not sure the remaining group. I think there were like 400 people that were a part of then the settlement. I'm not 100% clear on what the settlement ended up entailing versus just completing it at the original price. Seems like a fine outcome, but for those people, it'd be about $13,000 per person on average. But for Tesla, obviously a pretty small impact. All right, a couple of things to vote on. So the earnings questions for or the xAI.com earnings questions are now available. So probably unlikely that any new questions would make it to the top at this point, but you definitely can still go vote on the questions that have been submitted, and that will probably have an impact still. These tend to change throughout the week leading up. So definitely, if you want to connect to xAI, go and vote. I try not to comment too much on these, but the first question here, it's about FSD transferability. This question has probably been asked like 5 times, so hopefully we can get another question in there, at least another question that ends up at the top. It's frustrating when those end up being the same. But the other thing you can vote on is supercharger locations now for Q3. This happens every quarter. Last quarter, a supercharger in Poland won. This quarter, you can see, number of different options throughout the US and internationally. You can vote for 5 different options, or up to 5 different options. I'll do some subliminal messaging there on the screen, but definitely go vote. The link for that is in the description, as well as the xAI link as well. And then last couple of things. Interesting update on the UAW today. We've talked before about how negotiations are going to be coming up soon with the UAW and the automakers, and it looks like those are starting to kick off. With the UAW reaching out today or I guess making appearances today at each of the factories for, these big 3. And they say, the president, Sean Fain, said that the strike target is the big 3. If the big 3 is not going to come to the pump for workers, there's going to be issues. So not surprising, obviously negotiating tactic, but coming out pretty early with those strike mentions. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops here over the next few months. And then finally, we've got an update on Lucid. They have announced their Q2 delivery and production report. 2,100, almost 2,200 vehicles produced, about 1,400 delivered. Very similar numbers to last quarter. If we look at this in context, we can see here, deliveries, 2 vehicles less than last quarter, production, 150 vehicles or so less than last quarter. And you can see inventory continues to grow. So the spread between these 2 lines, that'd be your growth in inventory. They're now at about 4,500 vehicles that have not been delivered, versus 1,400 delivered this quarter. If you use the days of supply calculation that Tesla uses on their earnings report, that ends up being 243 days of inventory, or inventories if you want to look at my typo there, versus Tesla's 16. So it continues to look pretty challenging for Lucid at this point. Obviously, with their price points, they're above the federal tax credits and competing with, the Model S refresh and things like that. So I don't know. It's tough to see a path for them, but obviously they've got a lot of financial backing. We'll see how that plays out. I'm not super hopeful on Lucid. All right. I know that was a long one today, but that'll wrap it up. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Thursday, July 13th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.